You wouldn't believe it, but it's true. A trusted person lost everything because of their own emotions. Do you think it was all just a coincidence? But the real truth is yet to come. This is a story you won't want to miss. Dear listeners, please subscribe my channel to help achieve Goal 1000 number. It was an ordinary morning in late September 2015, but for the small town of Ever Spring, nestled deep in the quiet hills of New England, this particular autumn day would mark the beginning of a scandal so shocking, so vile, that it would forever alter the town's serene facade. Known for its cobblestone streets, centuries-old churches, and a community that seemed to know everyone's business, Ever Spring had always been a peaceful, almost idyllic place. The kind of town where neighbors greeted each other with a smile, and Sunday Mass was a gathering of friends rather than just a religious obligation. Crime and controversy were foreign concepts here, or so everyone thought. But the peace of this picture-perfect town shattered when whispers began circulating, whispers that would leave the entire town in disbelief. A respected Catholic priest, someone who had served this community for years, was rumored to have been involved in an illicit affair with a married woman. This was not just any priest. Father Thomas Hartley, a man of devout faith, had been the heart of St. Mary's Church for over a decade. His warm, compassionate nature and dedication to his parishioners had earned him the admiration of everyone in Ever Spring. At the age of 42, with his salt-and-pepper hair and kind, gentle eyes, he was the epitome of the devoted priest. His presence in the town had always been one of stability and reverence. Yet, beneath this saintly exterior, Father Hartley harbored a secret, a desire that had slowly begun to consume him, a desire that would destroy everything he had worked for. Laura Bennett, a 35-year-old mother of two and the wife of local businessman Daniel Bennett, was a familiar face at St. Mary's. She wasn't just a parishioner. She was an active member of the church community, participating in everything from the church choir to organizing charity events and helping with community outreach. To the townsfolk, Laura was the model of a dedicated Catholic wife and mother. She had everything one could ask for: a loving husband, beautiful children, and a place in the heart of the community. But behind closed doors, Laura was battling an emotional emptiness that no one could see. Her marriage to Daniel, though outwardly perfect, was anything but fulfilling. Daniel, a successful businessman, was often away on work trips, leaving Laura to care for their two young children and manage the household. Despite his successes, Daniel's absence created a loneliness in Laura's heart, one that she had tried to ignore for years. It was during these lonely moments that Laura began spending more and more time at St. Mary's, seeking solace in her faith. She found comfort in Father Hartley's presence, in his kindness and understanding. Their conversations, which started innocently enough, began to delve deeper. They spoke not just of faith and religion, but of life's struggles, of personal loss, and of the loneliness they both felt in different ways. Over time, these simple conversations turned into something far more intimate. What began as a connection between a parishioner and her priest quickly turned into something much darker, something neither of them could control. As autumn turned to winter, the bond between Laura and Father Hartley deepened, though neither of them acknowledged the growing attraction. They were both bound by their roles. He, a man of God sworn to celibacy; she, a wife and mother committed to her family. But the emotional pull was undeniable. Their friendship crossed an unspoken line, and by October 10th, 2015, they would both cross it physically. That night, after a successful fundraiser at St. Mary's, the church hall began to empty, the echoes of laughter and conversation fading away into the cool autumn air. Laura stayed behind to help clean up, as she always did. It was a quiet moment, one of routine, but something about it felt different. Father Hartley was alone in the hall, putting away decorations, when Laura approached him. The two exchanged a few words, simple at first, but then the conversation deepened, as it often did. As they stood talking, their hands brushed against each other. It was a brief touch, almost accidental, but in that moment, the air between them thickened. The unspoken tension was palpable. Father Hartley, usually so composed, found his emotions stirring in a way he hadn't felt in years. Laura, too, felt it, an electric charge that seemed to pull them closer. They stood there, eyes locked, both afraid of what was happening, but unable to stop it. The moment hung in the air for what felt like an eternity, before Father Hartley, unable to resist the pull, leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if testing the waters. But the moment their lips met, everything changed. It was a kiss of surrender, a kiss that unlocked a floodgate of emotions neither of them had been prepared for. The kiss, innocent at first, quickly escalated into something much more passionate. That night marked the beginning of an affair that would span several months, one that would tear apart not just their lives, but the entire town of Everspring. What started as stolen moments in the church, a secret glance or a lingering touch, soon turned into hidden meetings at motels on the outskirts of town. The thrill of the forbidden kept them coming back for more, even as guilt gnawed at them both. Father Hartley struggled to reconcile his vows with his desires, the man of God at war with the man who longed for Laura. Laura, too, was conflicted. She loved her children, loved her family, but the passion she felt with Father Hartley was intoxicating, unlike anything she had ever experienced. She was drawn to him, even as she knew the consequences of their actions could destroy everything. As the affair continued, Laura became more reckless, missing choir practice and neglecting her responsibilities at home. Her once perfect life began to unravel, and the small town of Everspring took notice. The whispers began, first from the more observant churchgoers, and then from anyone who cared to listen. Maggie Sullivan, a close friend of Laura's and a devout churchgoer, was the first to suspect something was wrong. She had noticed the subtle changes in Laura's behavior, the way she avoided eye contact, the restless energy in her movements. Maggie had even seen Laura leaving the rectory late at night, her face flushed and her eyes avoiding her gaze. Maggie's concern grew, and though she hesitated to confront her friend, she knew something was wrong. But Laura, in denial, brushed off Maggie's concerns. She told her it was nothing, that she was merely helping Father Hartley with church matters. Yet, deep down, Maggie wasn't convinced. The whispers grew louder. Soon, the small town of Everspring became a place of suspicion and gossip, as the townsfolk began to put two and two together. The affair was no longer a secret. As the winter months rolled in, the tension between Laura and Father Hartley reached a boiling point. Each meeting, each stolen kiss, came with the weight of their guilt. And all the while, Daniel remained blissfully unaware. That is, until the rumors began to reach his ears. Then one day, Father Thomas Hartley suddenly disappeared, and despite extensive searches, he was nowhere to be found. The entire town was worried about where Father Thomas Hartley had gone. Eventually, the case reached the police, and they too began searching for him. As days passed, the suspicion surrounding Laura Bennett deepened. Initially, the police had considered Father Thomas Hartley's disappearance as a tragic accident, but as the investigation unraveled, darker theories began to surface. Phone records revealed that had made a call from the motel the night of the incident, a detail she had conveniently omitted during her initial interview. Additionally, surveillance footage from a nearby gas station caught her Laura car leaving the motel in the early hours of the morning, directly contradicting her alibi. By late February, the pressure on Laura was unbearable. With mounting circumstantial evidence, the police called her in for further questioning. Under the intense scrutiny of the investigators, Laura's composure finally cracked. She admitted to the affair with Father V, but vehemently denied any involvement in his death. Despite her confession, the police were convinced that Laura knew more than she was letting on. They started to piece together a timeline of events, theorizing that Daniel Bennett had confronted the couple at the motel, and in the ensuing struggle, Father Thomas Hartley had been killed. But without a body, their case remained weak, and the search for the priest's remains continued. As March 2016 arrived, the snow began to melt, slowly revealing the grim reality that Laura and Maggie had so desperately tried to conceal. A hiker, walking his dog near the edge of town, stumbled upon a disturbed patch of earth. Upon further investigation, he uncovered a shallow grave, Father Thomas Hartley's body. The police were called, and within hours, the town of Everspring was thrust into shock. The discovery of the body confirmed the worst suspicions. Father Thomas Hartley had been murdered, and the evidence pointed directly to Laura Mitchell and her husband, Daniel. The media descended upon the small town, turning it into a circus of flashing cameras and probing questions. The scandal that Laura had tried so desperately to avoid was now playing out on the national stage. With the body recovered, the police intensified their search for Daniel, who was still on the run. A warrant for his arrest was issued, charging him with the murder of Father Thomas Hartley. Laura, now under constant surveillance, was arrested as an accessory to murder. Her once respectable life lay in ruins. As the town of Everspring struggled to deal with the fallout from the scandal, the focus shifted to finding Daniel and bringing him to justice. But each passing day made the chances of locating him slimmer. The manhunt spanned multiple states, and as the weeks turned into months, the question on everyone's mind was simple. Would Daniel Bennett ever be found? And would justice be served for the murder of Father Thomas Hartley? When spring arrived in Everspring, there was an uneasy calm. The blossoms on the trees and the chirping of birds provided a stark contrast to the undercurrent of dread that still lingered in the town. The discovery of Father Thomas Hartley's body had shaken the community to its core, and with Daniel Bennett still at large, fear hung in the air like a thick fog. Everspring, once an idyllic town, had become a place of whispered conversations, sideways glances, and an unspoken understanding that things would never be the same. Daniel Bennett's face was now plastered on every news channel, and his name was spoken in hushed tones by those who had once considered him a friend. Tips poured in from all corners of the country, but Daniel remained elusive, slipping through the fingers of the authorities time and time again. Meanwhile, Laura Mitchell sat in a cold, gray cell, awaiting trial. The woman who had once been the pride of St. Mary's, a devoted mother and wife, was now the center of a scandal that had shaken the very foundations of Everspring. Her confession to the affair had already sealed her fate in the eyes of the public, but her role in the cover-up of Father Thomas Hartley murder left little room for sympathy. Laura's trial was set for June 2016, and as the date approached, the media frenzy only intensified. Maggie, too, faced her day in court. Although she had not been involved in the actual killing, her role in helping Laura bury Father Thomas Hartley's body made her an accessory after the fact. Overcome with guilt and the realization that their secret could no longer be kept, Maggie had turned herself in after the body was discovered. Her testimony would be crucial in the trial, but her involvement ensured that she would not walk away unscathed. June 15th, 2016, marked the first day of Laura's trial. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Reporters filled the benches, eager to capture every detail, while the townsfolk who had once attended Mass at St. Mary's now sat in judgment of the woman they had once admired. Laura's children, too young to fully comprehend the gravity of the situation, were kept away from the proceedings, sheltered from the prying eyes of the public. The prosecution painted a damning picture of Laura as a woman driven by lust and desperation, willing to do anything to protect her secret. They described the affair in vivid detail, stolen moments, lies, and betrayal. They argued that when Daniel discovered the affair, Laura had conspired with him to kill Father Thomas Hartley and cover up the crime. This theory was supported by evidence of her involvement in disposing of the body. The defense, on the other hand, portrayed Laura as a victim of circumstances, a woman trapped in a loveless marriage who had made a terrible mistake. They argued that while she had indeed been involved in the affair, she had no knowledge of Daniel's intentions and had acted out of fear and panic after the murder was committed. Maggie was called to the stand and tearfully recounted the events of that night, insisting that Laura had been just as shocked as she was by Father Thomas Hartley's death. The trial stretched on for weeks, each day more grueling than the last. The media dissected every moment, turning the courtroom drama into a spectacle that gripped the nation. But as the trial neared its end, one question remained unanswered. Where was Daniel Bennett? On July 10th, 2016, the trial was abruptly interrupted by a stunning development. Acting on a tip from a small town in rural Montana, authorities had tracked Daniel to a remote cabin, where he had been hiding under an assumed identity. He was arrested without incident, a shell of the man he once was. Gaunt and hollow-eyed, Daniel Bennett's months on the run had clearly taken their toll. Now, in custody, Daniel's testimony added a new layer of complexity to the case. He would face trial for the murder of Father Thomas Hartley, and his testimony could either corroborate Laura's version of events or seal her fate. When Daniel was finally brought to the stand, the courtroom fell silent. The man who had once been a respected businessman now stood accused of murder, with his future hanging in the balance. His testimony was both shocking and heartbreaking. Daniel admitted to killing Father Thomas Hartley in a fit of rage after discovering the affair, but insisted that Laura had no part in the planning or execution of the crime. He described how he had lost control, how the sight of his wife with another man had driven him to the brink, and how, in the aftermath, he fled in terror, leaving Laura to deal with the consequences of his actions. Daniel's confession was a turning point in the trial. While it did little to absolve Laura of her role in the cover-up, it cast doubt on the prosecution's theory that she had been a willing participant in the murder itself. The jury now had to grapple with the complexities of the case, the tangled web of lies and half-truths that had brought them to this point. On August 5th, 2016, the jury reached a verdict. Laura Mitchell was found guilty of being an accessory to murder. Her involvement in the cover-up was undeniable. However, she was acquitted of the more serious charge of conspiracy to commit murder. The jury, swayed by Daniel's testimony that Laura had not been involved in the actual killing, sentenced her to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6 years. Daniel Bennett, on the other hand, was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life. His once promising career, marriage, and life had been destroyed by that one moment of uncontrollable rage. Maggie, who had cooperated fully with the authorities and testified against both Laura and Daniel, was given a reduced sentence of 2 years probation. Her role in the crime was viewed as a tragic mistake made in the heat of the moment. As the dust settled, the town of Everspring was left to pick up the pieces. St. Mary's Church, once the heart of the community, struggled to recover from the scandal. The congregation dwindled, the memory of Father Thomas Hartley's affair and murder casting a long shadow over the church's once sterling reputation. The Mitchell children were sent to live with relatives out of state, their lives forever altered by the choices of their parents. Laura, now a prisoner, spent her days reflecting on the choices that had led her to this point. The love she had once felt for Father Thomas Hartley seemed distant, almost unreal. The guilt of what had happened haunted her, but there was also a small part of her that felt relief. The truth had finally come out, but at a cost she would pay for the rest of her life. Daniel Bennett, too, grappled with the weight of his actions. Alone in his cell, he replayed the night of the murder over and over in his mind, unable to escape the image of Father Thomas Hartley's blood on his hands. He knew he would spend the rest of his life paying for what he had done, but part of him longed for redemption, a way to atone for the sins that had destroyed so many lives. The story of Father Thomas Hartley's illicit affair with a married woman and the subsequent murder would be told and retold in Everspring for years to come, a cautionary tale of love, betrayal, and the dark consequences of unchecked desire. As the town slowly began to heal, the name of Father Thomas Hartley would forever be remembered, not for the good he had done, but for the tragedy that brought an end to his life and shattered the lives of those around him.